Hunter's Relic of the Stars is the single most ambitious, independently produced Flash game I've ever played. It's somewhere around 6 or 7 hours long, and it's so big that it's split into 6 different levels, 6 different games on Newgrounds.com, because putting all the stages together would have been just too huge for the site to handle. If you didn't know, it's made by Rhete, the guy who's hosting this competition, and maybe it's a little sycophantic to play his game for his competition, but I like it, and it fits the theme, so who cares? This game took Rhete 3 years to make, and he had developed over 3,000 art assets, if I remember the statistic correctly. And he did all the coding and all the art himself. The only thing he didn't do himself was the music, which he got from the Newgrounds audio portal. Now, I do have some criticisms of the game, obviously. I mean, it's as impressive as the amount of art is, it is kind of ugly, and I sometimes feel like the scope of the game might work against it, because some of the levels start to feel a little repetitive. But nevertheless, it really nails this one cool concept to me of controlled chaos. Like, especially in this segment, where he has all these different enemies that he's introduced previously, but he molds them all together in these unique ways that that almost become overwhelming. Like, I died on this segment a lot, because it starts to overwhelm you when there's all this different information stretching along around you. And to me, that's kind of the pinnacle of hard game design, is when you can bring together a bunch of predictable, fair design elements in such a way as to overwhelm the player, but without being, unfair, basically. It's kind of like a lot of the latter areas in Castlevania 1, like the Hallway Before Death, which is wholly made up of areas of enemies that you know the behaviors of, but they come together in these really complex, intricate ways. And I love that. Ikaruga, like level 4 of Ikaruga, is kind of the pinnacle of that design philosophy to me. And if you watch this level, you see all the different ways that these enemy patterns bounce off each other, and it's really neat and interesting. And this level kind of encapsulates that the best to me. That idea of controlled chaos, I think, is why a lot of people prefer like Super C to Operation C. That's when I kind of thought of the concept for the first time, was when I played Operation C and Super C for the first time back to back. And I liked Super C a little more, despite Operation C being kind of more polished. It just doesn't really have any of the weird eccentricities of Super C, like the crummy starting gun or neat kind of weird boss fights. But Operation C is a really perfect, elegant piece of design, but it never feels like it's about to lose control like Super C does. Super C has this chaos to it that isn't present in Operation C, and is present in Hunter's Relic of the Stars. That's just what really impresses me about this game. And that's a really hard balancing act, because it's so easy when you have this big, broiling, massive game in your hand just to lose control of it and have it explode everywhere. And then you have something like Silver Surfer on the NES, where it's just a big, ugly mess, and it's not satisfying at all to play. So these areas, even though they do get a little repetitive to me sometimes, just few design ideas that just get reused a couple too many times, it still merges in these very interesting ways, and I totally love that. I think most of Rhete's games really capture that balance pretty well. Like his I'd never played too much of his shmups, but they definitely, mostly because they were really hard, and I might revisit them after I do this video, just because playing this kind of reminded me how much I like his work. But the Bullet Maze game does the same thing, where Bullet Maze is kind of a Ikaruga mixed with World's Hardest Game type deal, where you are going back and forth between these big mazes of black and white bullets and switching between black and white like Ikaruga, and it's very fun. And it's very challenging in the same very rewarding way. And most of Rhete's games are all hard, like Super Zalixer. Super Space to Win RPG is another one of my favorites, and that's kind of satirizing the total opposite approach. And I am glad to see that Rhete is kind of moving away from this art style, like with stuff like Super Zalixer and Bullet and the very abstract Bullet Maze, just because it is not gorgeous to look at, but it's totally functional in this game. You just get kind of used to it and it works fine. I definitely like that the game doesn't take itself really super seriously, like a game like, say, E.G., which is another super ambitious freeware effort, but that game, it kind of just has this Code Geass-iness to its dialogue, and it's so serious about its themes that it just gets kind of ridiculous. This game is just more of a straightforward tribute to the more just barely existing plots of the old Contra games and such. Although I do like how a lot of the cutscenes are directed. It's by DMAC. I think he worked on Dust and Elysian Tale later on, which is totally impressive. I'm glad that he went on to do something like that big. I love the interplay of all the different things here. The sine wave of that missile guy with the bouncing cloud and the wind, it all comes together really well. And yeah, I really like a lot of these enemy behaviors. Mostly the sine wave missile guy. Here's the checkpoint, whose lasers just kind of bounce back and forth between very small and very large. Oh, this guy's kind of weird. I need to back up. And there we go. If you can dodge the first two, then you can just eke underneath him. This is another cool screen, because if you can get right in there and then fall down and then shoot him, then you're good. I also like how in this game all the weapons are useful. That's a very common trap, I think, for this kind of genre to fall into, is just to have one weapon that's better than all the others. I mean, Super C fell for that with just the really amazing flamethrower, or maybe the spreader. And this game, I kind of stick with the shotgun for a lot of it, but the machine gun becomes quite helpful, and the pistol, which we get after the next boss, is also totally helpful. The sine wave beams here kind of remind me of the Medusa heads in Castlevania 1, and that's kind of a good point of comparison, is Castlevania and Contra both, because they both did the same balancing act with the complex enemy patterns really well. And I think that's where Rhete gets a lot of his inspiration, is kind of trying to capture that sense of really satisfying challenge. And here's another kind of easy screen. I think there's a few too many. I think it could have benefited from just trimming down some of the filler screens that just are ideas that we were already totally familiar with. That's kind of the strength of, I think, Castlevania, is that it's much briefer than this game, so it doesn't stretch out its ideas as long, but it's still it is definitely trying to emulate like the big AAA title games that are like 6 or 7 hours long, and in that sense it's totally successful and has just as much variety as a lot of those games. I think I just, as a rule, kind of tend to prefer the much smaller scale old NES games or freeware games like Starguard, which are only like a half hour long. Okay, I really don't want to die here, because I only have 1 health, but I'm going to... Oh, I died. Okay. Whatevs. The checkpoints are pretty few and far in between, but you have infinite lives, which I think is a nice compromise to maintain the stakes of older titles, and while maintaining that... while being more playable than something like Ninja Gaiden 1 with its really harsh penalties for death. Only in the last part. I mean, Ninja Gaiden 1 took the same approach for most of it. Ninja Gaiden's another good example of that kind of challenge, where you just, after a certain point, you can maneuver through all the chaos, and it's very satisfying when you finally manage to do so. And that this game is does a great job at being an independently produced freeware game that tries to capture the spirit of Ninja Gaiden, Castlevania, Contra, and then to a lesser extent Mega Man and Metroid. The Metroid elements are pretty subdued all in all. It never gets in the way of the gameplay, thankfully. But he does use the exploration elements to some interesting effects, especially in the base level, which is kind of like the hub for this whole finale. I just think it's so cool how many different and varied approaches there are to game design in the freeware community. I mean, you have people like Ink Repair or Cactus who just make like dozens or hundreds of 5-minute long freeware games that just are interesting and just analyze really cool concepts and are made in like a day, like Psychosomnium or any Ink Repair's games. He has so many of them. And then there's people like, I don't know, Lauren Schmidt, who 20-30 minute long, super polished, awesome games like Starguard. And then there's like the hour-long games like Rhete or Hero Core, and those are super fun. And then a couple people like Rhete, and those are like what most of Rhete's games are, is like the half-hour to an hour-long games like the In3 games or Bullet Maze. And then you have a few people who really undertake total huge projects like this, and the only one that I really think is completely successful at it is Cave Story, but yeah, I so admire that kind of ambition. It just kind of blows my mind. And here's the other big plus of this game, is the boss fights can be really intense and fun. Again, I mean, just like keeping with the scale being kind of the game's greatest strength and weakness, is that I think that some of this boss fight might run on a little too long, but that also just kind of gives a little more gravitas and keeps you on your toes throughout the whole fight. And it's very easy just to kind of screw up, but in ways that feel like your fault and not just, oh, I got bored during the fight and died, which is just the lamest kind of difficulty. And there's so much variety to this guy. There's a lot of variety to this guy's patterns, even though he has just this one basic format. I feel like Rhete probably wanted at least one boss that just punches you from the background, since that's just kind of a good trope from these old games. First example I can think of is the intro boss from Contra Hardcore. Oh, that killed me a number of times. Oh, crud. Okay. I don't want to die. Can I kill it? Can I get him? Oh my goodness. Okay, I think I got this. Yeah, he's dead. He said, even though he died at this level of heart health like 3 times. Oh, jeez! Oh, wow, that's like... That's douchey. Like Death in Castlevania when he still has his attack even after he dies. Alright, now we got our starting pistol, which is still useful at the end of the game. Kind of a nice descent back to the start of the level, give it some symmetry. And now we head back into the base. And now that we have the pistol, we can open up all these computers. So again, that's kind of the whole Metroid-y aspect, but it works well for it. I mean, it's all linear, but the way of reusing certain environments from different angles and with different tools is a nice change of pace, I think, from... Oh, I like that this guy is basically just a straight riff on Sniper Joe from Mega Man. A lot of the enemy patterns are unique, but then a few of them are just obviously taken from other games, and I think that's totally fine. And we're running out of time here, so I'd like to thank Rhete for making great games. I'd like to thank him for hosting what I think has been the best Let's Play Olympics on Socks Make People Sexy. I'd like to thank him for being a generally cool dude and helping me with my own game design troubles. I'd like to thank everyone else at the Socks Make People Sexy forum and anyone else who may be watching this. I've had a really fun time, and I can't wait to do it again. Alright, and I'm dead. That seems like a good place to end things.